Ever wondered what you can really do with 3D models these days inside After Effects? Or maybe you just enjoy hanging out with me while I build a scene from scratch. Either way, you're in the right place. My mission in this tutorial is very simple: to show you things you didn't know, maybe even change the way you work, and perhaps even solve a few challenges on the way. Let's dive in. Now this is a slightly longer tutorial, so here's the plan. We'll start by grabbing some 3D models, set up the comp, and then create smooth camera moves, fix those pesky background issues, and add some stylish, semi-transparent 3D text. Hang on for this is going to be very exciting. Then we're going to light up the scene properly. And if you stick around until the end, I'll show you one solid trick for solving these dreaded flickering and quality issues in the advanced 3D renderer. And don't worry, chapter markers are there, or actually here, if you want to skip ahead. Just do me a favor, before you fast forward, tap those shiny YouTube buttons. It really helps more than you know. Alright, let's begin. First, let me show you the assets that I'll use. So there are two models. Those are three. You can download them from the links underneath. The first one is this sci-fi hangar from Sketchfab. The second one is this army man running. This is from Fab. And I'm also going to use this HDRI image from Polyhaven. I already imported those three assets, and I'll start by grabbing this model and drag and drop it to the composition to create a new composition out of it. And I'm going to say, okay, it comes upside down for whatever reason, so the orientation is wrong. I'll change it to 90 degrees, and here we are inside this 3D hangar. I'm also going to visit the composition settings, name this one Running Man, as well as verify that these are the settings that I'm using. So I'm basically just selecting the first preset, and then I'll click OK. Now I'll drag the army man running to this composition, and I'll click on Make Comp Size, and I think I want to reduce it to maybe 40%. I have some experience with this, and this is going to be the new 100% scale for this model. So I'll click OK, and then I'll drag it down until he's touching this surface here, this podium. Now, if I want to see the animation of this runner, I can go ahead and choose it from the animation options here in the Properties panel. And now for a preview, we can see that indeed he's running. I can also see that I have some redundant frames here. So while this is selected, I'll press O to go to the out of this layer, and then press N to set the end of the work area region, and then right click and finally choose Trim Comp to work area. Now I'll go to the beginning and let's animate the camera. So I want, as you probably saw at the beginning, to create some sort of an orbit motion around this actor, and then come back to the start and loop it over and over again. All right. So to do this, I'll use a camera with a zoom lens. So I'll go to the layer menu, and under new, create a new camera, and I'll choose the 20mm preset and click OK. And this is going to change the zoom of the scene. And in order to easily navigate the camera, I'm going to create some sort of a 3D gimbal for it. So I'll right click on the camera and then choose Camera, Create Orbit Null. And this is going to create a null object. It's going to automatically let me show you the columns parent and leak. So the camera is a child of this null object, which means that I can easily now control it using this gimbal. So to show you what I mean, I'm going to open the transform settings, and I'm also going to click on Draft 3D. So everything is going to be real time while I'm working on this animation. All right, I'll start by pulling away from the scene. So I'll just click and start to drag on the Z axis. I'm also going to add shift to the mix, so it's going to move faster. And I'm going to move until I see the edge of the model. So something like this. So maybe negative 20, 30. And then I'll create a keyframe for the position. I also want to create some interesting angle here. So for the X rotation, I'm just going to highlight it and type in 20. And so we are going to come from underneath the floor. So basically the floor level, but I'll give it some angle. So for the Y rotation, I'll do negative 20 degrees. And now we can see the edge of the frame here, but don't worry, I'll show you how to fix it in a moment. For now, I'm just going to make sure to record keyframes for the X and Y rotation, and then I'll move to, let's say, 3 seconds, and I'm just going to push in. So basically just getting more and more closer to the actor here. So maybe around 400 on the Z or Z. And then I'm just going to change the Y rotation. So I'm going to click and move until I get to an interesting angle. See how this is the best way to control cameras by using this null, which is basically moving our camera. All right, now let's move to 7 seconds. And over here, let's change our Z position to 30, which puts the camera in a very awkward place. So I'll change the X rotation to 10 just to bring it back into the frame. And I'm going to continue and orbit around this guy. Okay, we have a hole here. We need to solve it. I'll show you what to do in a moment, as promised, but I'm just going to, you know what, let's just do one full revolution. So 1, 0. And now at the end, let's just see what we created. So we are starting from behind and then we are going through those structures. So it looks a little bit strange, but let's just finish with the animation and then fix all the problems. So over here at the end, I'll take the last position keyframe, copy and paste it. So I'll return back to where I started. And I also want to retrieve the same X rotation. So I'll copy this keyframe and paste it as well. But for the Y rotation, I don't want to copy and paste because let me show you what happens when I do it. Just going to preview from this point onward. It's just going to mess things up. What we want is to continue in the same direction. So in this case, we actually want to move to the opposite side. And because we want to end up at the same angle, it's basically going to be 360 minus 20, which is going to give us 340. Remember, the beginning angle is negative 20, and when we are finishing with this angle, it should loop seamlessly. So again, let's preview it and see how this works. And if we are here, let's solve this issue that we are running through the constructions here. And I'll do it by selecting the camera and just change the camera position on its Z-axis or Z. So I'm just going to place it over here and then I'll start to move it until I'm inside the structure. So maybe negative 980 should do the trick for us. And let's preview again. And as you can see now, we do have some left over here. So these things that we may want to fix, so maybe negative 960 in my case. All right, let's preview again. And I think this is going to look much more smoother. Now, I know the obvious problems are that we are seeing the edge, so there is nothing over here. We're going to fix it in a moment. But also the animation is not so smooth. So first, let's deal with the animation because here we are animating stuff. I'll click on the world position to select all the keyframes, then command click on X and Y rotation and press F9 first to easy ease the entire animation, which is going to work great for the starting and ending keyframes, but it's not going to work so well for the middle ones. Let me show you how this looks. So we have some sort of a stop, a pause, and another one over here, and then it's basically working. And the reason is this is the nature of those easy ease keyframes. You see, they're almost coming to a complete halt. Maybe I need to show it to you using the speed graph. It will be more clear. It's basically just going to 0 in terms of its speed. So to fix it, I'm just going to select all the middle keyframes. This is something I always recommend for you to do when you're animating 3D cameras. Just select the middle keyframes, hold down Command, Control on Windows, and click until you see the pizza icon, which is the Auto Bezier, the circular icon. And again, let me show it to you first in the graph editor. Now we have smooth graphs. So the motion is also going to be smooth. It's not going to be linear. It's just not going to stop. So we'll have continuous motion from the beginning until the end. So nice. Excellent. All right, now we are ready to solve the problem over here when we are actually seeing the backside of this empty hole. So in order to solve it, I'll close the camera orbit null, and I'm also going to switch from one view to two views, making sure that I'm seeing the top view, and here on the right, I can make sure I'm actually watching it from the active camera, which is going to show us how this is going to look. So I'll click on the top view, and then I'll click twice on the comma key to zoom out. And then I'll select those two elements here, so those two models, and I'll duplicate them by pressing Command or Control D. I'll grab those two versions, maybe put them underneath, and also change their color to something else, just so it will be easy to differentiate between those two. All right, before moving on, I'll parent the army running man to the sci-fi hanger. So this means that whatever I'm going to do to this one, the army running man is going to follow along. And what I need to do is to flip its orientation. So I'll use the properties panel and type in 180 to basically flip them to the other side, creating a duplicate, a mirror version. So notice in our active camera view, what I'm doing is just filling the hole. So I'm just going to put it over here. It's just going to be visible for a moment, but it should be enough. It's almost like an Easter egg. Let me show you what I mean. I'll go back to the beginning. We can return back to one view now, and I'll preview the composition. So we are going to start from the same place, but when we are doing this move, we have something at the back, which is another copy of this guy. All right, excellent, good stuff. Now let's move over here around 2 seconds, and we are going to add some text, because everything that you are seeing here is actually happening in the Stern Effects labs. Did you know about it? Now you know. First, I'll hide the visibility of this null object. It's just annoying me that it is here. I'll save my progress just in case After Effects crashes, but it never does. Anyhow, let's return back to the mission here. I'll make sure that the composition is selected. Then I'll create a new text. You can do it from the keyboard shortcut if you want, or just from layer, new text. And I'll type in Stern FX Labs, and then option 8 to create this dot or bullet. Of course, this is going to be Alt 0149 on the Windows side. I love you Windows guys as well. All right, I'm going to reformat this title. So I'll select the text here and I'll choose a different font for it. I'll go with Gotham, which is a font that you can sync these days from Adobe Fonts. So let's select Gotham Bold. And then for the color, let's choose a bright yellow, which is going to work nice here. I actually want to duplicate this text, so I'll double click again to select it, copy it, and then go to the end and paste. So I'll have two instances of this. You'll see why in a moment. Then I'll reselect it here. I'll change the size. Let's start with 200. I'm not sure how big it needs to be. And then I'll return back to the selection tool. We are going to return and format it as needed over here. Oh, my God, I'm going to set it to 100 in terms of its horizontal scale. Not sure why it was different. Okay, so now I'm going to hold down Shift, and while the text is still selected, I'll switch to the ellipse tool, and then again, while holding down Shift, double click on the ellipse tool, and this is going to create a circle, of course. It's difficult to see it. Let's click on the color chip and just change it, so we'll see that we have a mask for this text. I'll open the text options, and under its path options, I'll tell it to marry the path to the text. And now I can close it, and I can return back to the text size and start to move it until it looks more or less nice. Now, I'm going to convert this text to a 3D layer, and then I'll set the X rotation to -90 degrees, as well as change its Y position. So I can do it from the properties panel. I can just drag it down, maybe something like this, so 1000. And then I'm going to climb up, go to the animate option, and make sure to enable per character 3D. And this is going to allow me, I'll close the transform for a moment, to go back to the animate option and add a rotation animator. And in this rotation animator, I'll change the X rotation to positive 90 degrees just for the X. And it's going to make the characters stand on this path. Okay, I'll close this animator. And in order for them to continue and animate, I'll return back to the main rotation. And for the Z rotation, I'll enable an expression and I'll type value plus time multiply by 52. And I came up with this value by trial and error, but you can spin it faster or slower depending on your needs. The reason that I'm adding value here is that at the beginning, I can still control this slider and tell it where to start. So maybe I want it to start from this point. It's just going to continue from this point using the time expression to revolve the text around its axis. All right, I saw a little jump at the end, and this is because we are repeating the first and last frame. So what we need to do is go to the last frame, then go one frame backward by pressing page up, and then pressing N to set the range for the composition. Now let's preview again, just to check that it is looping smoothly, both the text as well as the animation that we've created. And I think it does. All right, perfect. I'll close this and let's make the text a little bit more nicer and prettier. So I'll come to this point where I can see it and I'll open up the geometry options and I'll set the bevel style to angular and the extrusion depth to 50. And I want a semi-transparent letters here. So to do this, I'll go to the animate again and I'll go to front, color, and add an opacity animator. So this is the second animator. And then for the second one, I'll go to the add again. For the side, I'll do the same thing. So color, opacity, and I'll return to this menu once again, this time for the back. And I'm going to go color, opacity, 100. I'll change the front and the back to 30%. And for the side, maybe 60%. And this is going to create these semi-transparent letters, which looks really nice. And to make them even better, I'll open up the material options and play with the specular shininess. So I found that a value of 70 is a good starting point, but you can change your mind later when we'll add more lights. But already this looks very promising, and this is it for the text. Now let's relight the scene and make it more gorgeous and beautiful and mesmerizing. Why not? So we'll start by creating an environment light. I'll dismiss the draft 3D so we can actually see how this works. And I'm going to drop this Blue Photo Studio HDR image that I got from Polyhaven. I'll return back to the light and I'm going to say, well, reference this as a source light. And this is going to switch off the visibility for it. And now we can see that it uses it to light up the scene. Now you can still play around with the light transform for both X and Y rotation. So I'll start to scrub it and see what looks best, maybe around 50 degrees. Will give us those nice blue accent around the edges of this hanger. And to even it out, I'm going to create another light, this time using a keyboard shortcut. So Command Option Shift L, I'll add a point light. I'll set it to a complementary color, so a bright orange. I'll click OK, and I want to place it right in the middle of the scene. So to do it, I'll hold down Shift and I'll Shift parent it to the running man. And this will place it at the same anchor point. And from here, I can drag it up or down depending on what I want to achieve. But I think this is going to work perfect. All right, let's end up with a nice layer of glow just to make everything shine and magical. So I'll create an adjustment layer and I'll add to it the glow effect. I'll set the threshold to 40, the radius to 60, and the intensity to 0.3. Let's just test how this looks in different places. So I'm just going to switch it off and on. Looks quite nice. Now I'll maximize the frame and preview the scene. And I want you to pay attention to the ceiling area. Notice how everything is super flickery. Watch the area where I'm moving my mouse. So at the beginning, see all of these flickering issues. I'll pause the playback and you may think that you can go to the renderer options. This is at least what I thought, and play with the render quality. But even if I'm going to take it to very high numbers, it doesn't matter. So a leap of faith here. I'm just going to exaggerate by setting it to 50. You don't need to go this far. You may think that this is going to help, but it's not. Even if you're going to click on fit to scene and change the way the environment light shadows are being rendered, it's not going to work because we are not actually using any environment light shadows. Neither the resolution here will have any effect. So even if I'll double it, I'm doing everything that I thought would work just to prove the point here. I'll click OK, I'll go to the start and I'll preview again. So it's going to be a little bit more slower now to preview because we raised all of those settings. However, the issue persists. It still remains really flickering and you can actually see it while it is caching. But I will let it cache for the first 2 seconds before showing you the solution that I came up with, just because I think this is something Adobe needs to attend. This is something Adobe needs to fix. So again, from the beginning, here it is, very, very flickery. So I might as well, just to save some time, go back and change this render quality to something like 10. Should definitely work, and we won't be able to see any major difference. The way around it is to create yet another adjustment layer, and I'm going to call it Flicker Fixer, and MB for what it will actually do, motion blur. And for that, I'll use the CC Force Motion Blur. You can't use this one, Pixel Motion Blur, it won't have any effect because this one is meant to work with synthetic layers. Now, the downside is that the render time is going to be much slower. So instead of half a minute to render everything, it's going to be probably 4 to 5 minutes, depending on your machine. Still much faster than any 3D application. I'm also going to recommend to raise up the motion blur samples depending on your scene. So if you have a lot of flickering, you can raise this to a higher number. I'm just going to set it to 12, and then I'm going to wait for it to render. And I'll speed it up so you don't need to wait with me. And this is how it looks. Much nicer, and we also got motion blur for free. And that's how you can tame the wild world of 3D inside After Effects. From setting up your scene to solving these pesky flicker issues, you've now got a toolkit to make 3D a whole lot less intimidating. If you picked up even one trick today, hit that like button, maybe even subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And always remember, in the words of the Running Man,
here is Sub-Zero! Now, Plane Zero!
So don't let your 3D skills be Plane Zero, make them hero.